All right, so have you ever had that feeling where you're like totally hyped about an idea, like convinced this time you're going to crush that goal? Maybe you even spent like a whole afternoon getting organized, picturing those awesome results,
Hmm.
and then PFFT,
Hmm.
the energy just vanishes. It's
Yeah.
like your brain thinks all that planning was enough work for one day, right? Like
Yeah.
reward time, do absolutely nothing.
Totally. It's so common, but we don't really talk about it that much. Like, why is it so hard to go from, all that ambition to actually, like, doing
It's
stuff?
a real head scratcher, right? And it happens to all of us,
Yeah, for sure.
which is why I'm so glad we're diving into this today. We've been checking out this super interesting discussion on the Speak English with Class YouTube channel, specifically their video, English podcast for learning English, ambitious but lazy in your English learning.
Catchy title.
All right. And even if you're not like specifically trying to learn English right now, stick with us. The stuff they talk about is applicable to pretty much any goal.
Mm.
We're going to break down this whole feeling of being excited about big ideas,
Yeah.
but then kind of getting stuck.
Absolutely. It's like there's this gap between what we want to do and what we actually end up doing. And this video does a great job of explaining why that happens, like what the underlying reasons are.
Yeah, because too often we just beat ourselves up about it, right?
Yeah.
We think we're just lazy or something.
Exactly. But it's usually way more complex than that.
For sure. So whether you felt that disconnect between your goals and your actions, you're trying to learn English, or you're just interested in this whole procrastination thing, this deep dive is for you. We're going to pull out some really practical tips and insights from this discussion that can help you actually start making progress.
Definitely. We'll be looking at some of the key reasons this whole ambitious but lazy cycle happens. And more importantly, we'll be focusing on the strategies they talk about for breaking free from that cycle and actually gaining some momentum.
Okay, so let's jump into one of the first big roadblocks people hit when they've got big goals. It's this idea of waiting for the perfect moment,
Hmm.
Waiting for motivation to just magically appear. It kind of makes sense on the surface, right? Like once I'm really inspired, then I'll totally get started. But according to Speak English with Class, that's kind of like chasing a mirage.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. They even have this example in the video of feeling super pumped after watching some motivational video.
Yeah.
Like you're ready to change your whole life.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, you're scrolling through social media and that initial spark is totally gone.
Poof. It's so frustrating.
Totally. And it's not just about big life changes either. One of the hosts, Evan, told this story about spending 2 hours super carefully organizing his planner.
Yeah.
And then he felt so productive that he rewarded himself with a nap.
Huh. Oh, no.
I know. It's almost funny how we can trick ourselves into thinking planning is actual progress.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point they make in the video. There's this huge difference between that fleeting motivation, which is super unreliable, like the weather, and the power of actual momentum. Like once you start taking action, even a small step, it creates its own energy.
It's like pushing a car that's stalled out. That initial shove is tough, but once it starts rolling, it's way easier to keep it moving.
Exactly.
And they really hammer home the importance of just starting something. Write a single sentence for that report. Practice one English phrase for 10 minutes, anything. The point is to do something concrete.
Right, because action creates its own motivation.
Yeah. They were saying that progress usually starts with, making the decision to act, not with waiting for a specific mood or feeling.
Yeah.
And that's such an important takeaway for literally any goal you're working toward.
It is. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It might never come.
So true. Just take that first step,
Yeah.
even if it's tiny. Okay, so you've managed to get yourself moving. You're taking those baby steps. You're not waiting for the perfect moment or
And
anything.
you're on a roll.
But wait, there's another sneaky obstacle that can trip us up.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Perfectionism.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And we often don't even see it as a problem, right? We
Uh-huh.
tell ourselves we're just being detail-oriented or having high standards.
Yes. Right. It's like fear with good branding.
Ooh, I like that.
Ah.
Fear with good branding. Because deep down, it's often just a fear of not being good enough,
Hmm.
which keeps us from even trying.
Yeah, it's so true. They had this example in the video of someone who took 3 whole weeks to post a 2-minute video.
Wow, 3 weeks.
Yeah, because they were so worried about sounding smart enough. And I think we can all relate to that, that fear of putting something out there that isn't perfect.
Oh, absolutely. And for people learning English, Evan talked about how common it is to rehearse conversations in your head perfectly.
Right. And then when you actually try to speak,
Total brain freeze.
yep, because we're so focused on avoiding mistakes that we end up not speaking at all. And it's ironic because the more we avoid making mistakes, the less we actually
It's
learn.
a vicious cycle.
It is. So their advice here was to swap out perfect for progress.
I love that. It takes so much pressure off. Right. It's acknowledging that those first attempts might be kind of messy, but that's part of the process.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
Right. It's about moving forward, learning from those initial steps, and getting better over time instead of waiting for some imaginary moment when everything's going to be perfect, which, let's be real, probably won't happen.
Totally. And for anyone who's been putting things off because they're afraid to make mistakes, especially when learning something new, that shift in thinking can be huge.
Huge. Okay, so let's say you've gotten past that initial inertia, you're starting to take action, and you're focusing on progress, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
You're golden, right?
You'd think so.
Sadly, no. The next potential pitfall they talk about is overwhelm, or what they call goal bloating.
Haha, goal bloating, love it.
I
It's when you get all excited and make these massive to-do lists with a million different goals.
Yes. You got color-coded spreadsheets, multiple planners, the whole shebang.
And then you end up just feeling totally paralyzed.
Right. And then you spend all your time researching more productivity techniques instead of actually doing the things on your list.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
They use this analogy of juggling too many water balloons. You're trying to hold on to so much at once that you can't really focus on any one thing, and eventually everything just splatters on the ground.
Makes sense.
One of the hosts talked about how he set like 12 different goals for 1 month and ended up accomplishing none of them.
Ouch.
I know. He did say, though, that his desk was exceptionally organized. So there's that.
The illusion of productivity strikes again. But it's not real progress, is it?
Nope, not even close. So the solution, according to this video, is to really streamline your focus. Instead of juggling 5 different goals at once, just pick one main thing to focus on. That way you can actually start building some momentum. And this is especially true for people learning English. Don't try to improve everything at once. Maybe this week you work on speaking, next week you focus on building vocabulary. By focusing on one thing at a time, you can make way more progress, way faster.
Right, it's about quality of focus over quantity of goals.
Totally. So you've narrowed down your focus, you're ready to get to work.
Oh.
But wait, there's another sneaky obstacle waiting to trip us up. This one can even disguise itself as being productive.
Oh, sneaky.
Right. It's what the video calls procrastination in disguise.
Uh-huh, I see where you're going with this.
So it's like when we spend hours researching the best methods or carefully planning the perfect strategy. But in reality, we're just avoiding the actual hard work.
It's like spending all day organizing your tools in the shed without actually building anything.
The perfect analogy. They talked about how people learning English might fall into this trap. They spend hours searching for the perfect app or organizing their study materials, but never actually practice speaking or listening.
It happens to all of us, really. We get caught up in the preparation and forget about the actual doing. Like, I've definitely spent way too much time researching the best way to do something instead of just, like, starting.
Totally. So the big question to ask yourself here is, are you actually preparing to do the work, or are you just finding creative ways to put it off? There's a big difference.
Big difference. And being honest with ourselves about that can be tough.
Yeah, it can. But once you figured that out, the next step is to just jump in. Start messy, start small, but start something.
Exactly. And sometimes, even when we're not doing all that prep work, we can still get stuck in our own heads. The video talks about this too. The exhaustion of overthinking.
Ooh, I know that feeling well.
Right. It's crazy how overthinking something can be way more tiring than actually doing it. They told this story about staying up all night trying to figure out the perfect way to respond to an email, rehearsing it over and over in your head, and then waking up exhausted the next day without having even sent the email.
It's like you ran a marathon in your mind.
Seriously. And I think for people learning English, this can manifest as like worrying about grammar mistakes or having perfect pronunciation or just generally worrying about being understood.
Right. All of those worries can be really draining. And the more you overthink, the more likely you are to just give up altogether.
Yep. You psych yourself out. So what do they recommend?
Well, they suggested doing what they call a brain dump, which is basically just writing down all your thoughts and anxieties. Just get them out of your head.
That's a good idea.
And then once you've done that, commit to taking just one tiny action. Say one sentence in English, record yourself talking for a few seconds, anything.
To break the cycle?
Exactly. Because as they said in the video, you learn way more from actually doing something than you do from just thinking about it. Experience is the best teacher.
Hands down the best.
So we've been talking about all these different obstacles: waiting for motivation, perfectionism, overwhelm, procrastination in disguise, overthinking. And it occurred to me that they might all have something in common.
Oh, interesting. Like,
The video makes a really compelling argument that what often looks like laziness is actually just fear in disguise.
that makes a lot of sense.
Right. They had this example of, like, staring at your computer screen for hours, feeling totally stuck. And maybe you think you're just lacking energy or motivation, but really, you're just scared that whatever you produce won't be good enough. Fear can be so paralyzing.
It really can. And for English learners, that fear might be about speaking up. They're scared of sounding silly or making mistakes.
Exactly. But the good news is that the video emphasizes that fear is totally normal. Everyone experiences it. And the best way to deal with it isn't to try to make it disappear, but to take action despite the fear.
Like, acknowledge the fear and do it anyway.
Exactly. They actually frame taking action, even though you're scared, as a form of bravery. Every time you speak up in English, even though you're worried, every step you take toward your goals, even though you're afraid of failing, that's a huge act of courage.
Love that reframing.
Right. Okay, so you've recognized the fear, you're ready to face it, and you're ready to take action. The next big strategy they talked about was making that first step super, super easy.
Like, ridiculously easy.
Exactly. The point isn't to suddenly force yourself to work like crazy or anything. It's about making that first step so small and simple that it's almost effortless to start.
They use the analogy of climbing a mountain in slippers versus putting on a pair of good hiking boots. So true.
Right. They even had this personal example of wanting to read more, but always feeling too busy or tired. Their solution was to just put a book on their nightstand before bed. So simple, but it totally worked. No more excuses.
Brilliantly simple.
Right. And they had some specific advice for English learners, too. Instead of trying to do an hour of grammar study, set a much smaller goal, like learning one new phrase that day,
Right, or keeping your English notebook out where you can see it.
or having a language learning app right there on your home screen. The easier you make it to start, the more likely you are to actually do it.
Because we're way less likely to procrastinate if the first step is tiny.
Exactly. It's about designing your environment in a way that encourages action instead of relying solely on willpower. Because we all know willpower can be pretty flimsy sometimes. And those tiny actions, they add up over time. That's how you build lasting habits.
It's like the compound effect. Small, consistent actions lead to big results.
Totally. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you're walking away with some useful insights and some practical things you can actually start using today. We talked about a lot. The myth of waiting for motivation, how perfectionism can actually hold you back, the paralysis that comes from feeling overwhelmed, how procrastination can hide in plain sight, the exhaustion of overthinking, and the big one, how fear is often at the root of it all.
Yeah, we covered a lot, but hopefully in a way that felt, approachable and easy to understand.
I hope so. And most importantly, we talked about how crucial it is to make that first step super easy and to focus on progress instead of perfection. Remember, even the biggest accomplishments are just a bunch of small actions strung together.
So true.
All right, here's your challenge for today. Think about one goal you have, or maybe something specific you're trying to do with your English learning. What's one ridiculously easy action you can take today to get started? Don't wait for the perfect time or until you feel 100% ready. Just jump in, start messy, and get the ball rolling.
And one last thing to think about. Is there something in your life where you've always labeled yourself as lazy? Could it be that it's actually one of these hidden obstacles we talked about today that's holding you back? What's one tiny adjustment you could make to your approach to shift your perspective and finally start moving forward?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us for this deep dive. We hope you got something out of it. We're always learning right alongside you.
For sure. And we can't wait to dive into more interesting topics with you in the next deep dive. Until then, keep learning, keep taking action, and keep moving towards your goals.
See you next time.